Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Lionhack. This is an event I have a great fondness for, and more generally, student-driven involvement in the space, both here at Columbia and beyond. It's been amazing. I've really never seen anything like it in tech in the past in my career. So first, to everyone in the room, let me say I admire your courage and conviction for focusing your energies on Web3. Like in 2023, this is definitely not the path of least resistance. Your chosen path might even elicit hostility from some, or at least some tough questioning at your family's next holiday gathering. In fact, in my 25-year career as a computer scientist, I don't think I've ever encountered a technology that is as widely and deeply misunderstood as Web3, by which I mean blockchains and the applications that are built on top of them. I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about why this might be. Actually, last year at Lionhack, I spoke about a couple of the reasons for this: confusing terminology, the conflation of what the technology is for and with how it works under the hood, and a lack of shared mental models to think clearly about the technology's essential functionality and the types of applications that it enables. I also talked then about my favorite mental model for a general purpose smart contract platform like Ethereum, an open access and ownerless computer running in the sky in plain view as a public good, on which users can own data in a meaningful sense, enforced by cryptography. Achieving these seemingly contradictory properties, an ownerless computer that somehow tracks user ownership of data stored on it, was the fundamental breakthrough of the Bitcoin protocol. Now, Nakamoto clearly had in mind the specific use case of a cryptocurrency, namely tracking ownership of Bitcoins, but this technological breakthrough is much more general and profound. It's fundamentally about ownership in the digital realm, not about cryptocurrencies per se. So today, I want to talk about a different reason for blockchains, that blockchains in Web3 seem to be so misunderstood, which is that the technology seems to be an Inkblot, a Rorschach test, representing very different things to different people. Traders, for example, don't even care about the technology or its applications, except in as much as it affects asset prices. I'm going to set aside this group and the casino they inhabit, just as anyone focused on, say, the technology of deep learning should ignore what analysts might be predicting about Microsoft stock prices. More interesting is that, even among the select group of people who understand Web3's superpowers and care deeply about the technology, there are competing, seemingly unrelated narratives, all jockeying for the public's attention about what blockchains and Web3 are good for. For example, in November, I attended a workshop at which most of the crowd came either from traditional finance or from the early Bitcoin community. The focus, naturally, was on cryptocurrencies, both as a store of value and as the basis of a global payment system with lower fees and greater reach than the status quo. In January, meanwhile, I attended a structured dinner discussion on the future of Web3, and this dinner kind of had more of a thought leader vibe to it. And so, while these two events in November and January, they were basically focused on the exact same technology, but there was zero overlap in attendance, other than me, and equally little overlap in content. At the dinner, almost no one mentioned cryptocurrencies or payments. Instead, the overarching narrative was Web3 and DAOs in particular as a mechanism that enables coordination at a never-before-seen global scale. Now, to be clear, I have no issues with either of these narratives, and I'm rooting for both of them to play out as their true believers envision them. But, personally, I've found myself drawn toward a third narrative, a sweet spot with more far-reaching consequences than cryptocurrencies, but also more concrete than global coordination. So let me tell you about, what I think is a narrative that makes it obvious why Web3 is inevitable, its superpowers long overdue. So let me ask you a question. Think about your laptop. Let's say you recently bought it from Apple, for like $2,000. Do you own it? Yeah, it's mine, you'd probably say. But what does that actually mean? Well, for example, Apple can't take it back from you or otherwise prevent you from using it. A thief could steal it from you, but that would be a crime and you'd have a legal recourse to get it back. The government could seize it from you, but only under unusual and court-approved circumstances. So legal nuances aside, your right to feel that you own your laptop with all the property rights that ownership affords. Such well-defined and enforceable property rights have, of course, been a linchpin of modern democracies, and the United States in particular. Let me ask you another question. Now, maybe I'm dating myself here, but think about your Facebook timeline. Let's say it consists of content that you yourself generated, photos you shot, messages you wrote, etc. Do you own it? I've asked that question to a lot of people, and it's striking how few of them seem to have contemplated it previously. It's also striking that no one that I've talked to has ever responded with, "Yeah, it's the same thing, I own that too." When prompted, everyone can feel at a visceral level the disparity in ownership between their physical and their digital possessions. Everyone knows that Apple can't reclaim your laptop for no reason, and everyone knows that Meta can unilaterally delete your account whenever they want. And it's not just about social media. Once you recognize your lack of property rights for what you've bought or created in the digital realm, it's there like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. Some of you, I'm sure, have purchased skins in a video game like Fortnite. Maybe not for $2,000, but with your hard-earned money nonetheless. Do you own those skins? Only to the extent that Epic Games says that you do. If the company disappeared overnight, your skins would go with them. It's not just about video games. It's really about the inevitable collision between two undeniable forces. The first undeniable force, which is a timeless one, is that people like to own stuff. For example, obsession with ownership underpins the endowment effect made famous by Kahneman, Tversky, and Thaler. Or, you can see this force play out every day at any children's playground around the world. The second undeniable force is a modern one, namely that people's lives, possessions, and identities increasingly exist in the digital world, with social media profiles and video game skins only two among an ever-increasing list of examples. Now, if you accept these two forces as undeniable, the importance of Web3's superpower, the open access and ownerless computer in the sky on which users can own data in a meaningful sense, that importance becomes obvious. For example, because of blockchain technology, and only because of this technology, we now have social media accounts, video game skins, digital artworks, and even entire networks that are genuinely owned, like a laptop, by individual users, not by centralized platforms. And this, surely, is just the beginning. So where do things stand now with blockchains and Web3 here in 2023? Let me address that question separately for the infrastructure layer, meaning making the computer in the sky as powerful and reliable as possible, separately from the application layer, i.e. figuring out what the computer in the sky is good for. Obviously, both of these are super, super important, and they're inevitably going to evolve together. On the infrastructure side, there is steady and measurable progress every year. For example, Layer 1s keep getting more sophisticated and powerful. And there's obviously been a huge explosion in Layer 2 development and adoption over the past couple of years. Similarly, the internet infrastructure grew more powerful and reliable along a relatively steady trajectory. With blockchains and Web3, we may still be in the dial-up era, but the broadband era has come into view. Now, as for the application layer, it kind of more develops in fits and starts. So for example, we didn't have DeFi until one day we did. And the same thing happened with the internet. There was no web until one day there was. There was no social media until one day there was. It's also worth remembering just how long it took for the internet to develop into what it is today, namely 54 years. The ARPANET rolled out around 1969. Think about the midpoint of this time interval, 27 years ago in 1996. Okay, I was a junior in college, and I used the internet, such as it was at that time, which meant that once a day, I would go to a special room in my dorm's basement, sit down at a Macintosh LC580 with an Ethernet cable coming out of the back, and I would go online to see if I'd received any emails in the past 24 hours. And back then, believe it or not, the answer was often no. These days, people fork over thousands of dollars to digital detox programs to go offline, probably while surrounded by redwoods or something like that. But believe me, in 1996, all you had to do was get out of the basement. It's not like the internet didn't have any applications in 1996. You could send emails, you could transfer files. As very recently, you could render static web pages in a browser like Mosaic or Netscape. But think of all the things we take for granted that didn't exist in 1996, a full 27 years after the internet's debut. YouTube, TikTok, social media, Wikipedia, online dating platforms, etc., etc. There were answers to the why question in 1996, but those answers got much more compelling as the years went by, which is something worth remembering today, a mere 14 years after Satoshi Nakamoto first dropped the Bitcoin white paper. So, to wrap up, dropping everything to work in Web3 is definitely not the path of least resistance. Not for you, not for me. For me, two big things clicked a few years ago, maybe, 2019 or so. The first was the realization that blockchains and Web3 are catalyzing a new multidisciplinary scientific area, synthesizing and building on deep results from distributed computing, cryptography, mechanism design, proof systems, game theory, quantitative finance, the list goes on. The second thing that clicked for me in 2019 was what I talked about today, the inevitability of property rights for digital possessions and the fact that blockchain technology can provide them. And these realizations are not speculative. They are based on simple facts on the ground. No amount of smoke and mirrors can obscure the core technical depth of this emerging scientific area, and no amount of misunderstanding can diminish the technology's fundamental capabilities or the power of the ownerless computer in the sky. And this is why, since the pieces of the puzzle fell into place for me back in 2019, my conviction in Web3 has been unshakable. The question is not if, the question is only when. Now, don't get me wrong, we've all got a lot of work to do in building infrastructure and dreaming up new generations of applications and educating everyone from software engineers to regulators about the game-changing functionality of this technology. We have a lot of work to do, but you, the young, brilliant, and hungry people in this room, are exactly the right people to do it. So that's all from me. Enjoy the day. Thanks very much.